Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Together Run. My name is Brendan Gallagher, and I'm filling in for Tina during this Together Run today. And she starts off all the time looking for something in nature to get in touch with. Much like Tina, I'm big into nature as primarily someone who loves to trail run these days. I'm currently touching a tree on the side of where I've chosen to do this today, which I live in Connecticut, and I've decided to go on the Pequannock Valley Greenway Rail Trail. That way I can avoid cars, and hopefully it's a little quieter. So we're going to get started. I start off a lot of the time these days doing a little bit of a walk warm-up to get the juices flowing and loosen up a little bit. I'm a little looser than I normally am because I'm starting later in the day than I normally do. So that's feeling pretty good. And walking on my toes for a little bit, and then on my heels, kind of stretch out my legs. And I do with my toes pointing out to the side, a couple of steps, just get all the muscles in the leg stretched out, and then I'll do the pigeon-toed walk. And then I'll break into a little bit of a slow run. And as we usually do on these together runs, we're going to do a number of check-ins to see how we're feeling and what's going on all around us. It's, I don't know when this is going to be released. It's kind of a late fall day here. And on the cool side. But again, as it's, sunny out right now, a little warmer than what I've had recently. So something nice. So we'll start off with our body scan. So if we start at the top of our head, very top, see what you're feeling. And we're going to work down, see if we're wearing any tension in our eyes. A little bit of an uphill there, so got my breathing going right off the bat. So it's like I get used to talking and running. And move down to our jaw and our cheeks. Let your jaw bounce a little bit. Release the tension in your face. Maybe turn your head a little bit. Make sure your neck is nice and loose. If you're feeling any tension there, maybe you slept hard. We'll go down to our shoulders. Shoulders are always something where I get tight, especially in races. Probably never did enough upper body work in my running, so I learned early on ways to help loosen those up. A lot of times we shake down. One thing I like to do if I'm feeling tight is take in a deep breath, bring my shoulders up, and then exhale and shake out. Just let them hang. And then we'll feel, see if there's any tension in your triceps, in your forearms, down in your fingers. Keeping your hands nice and loose. Don't clench up your fists. And then your torso. A little bit of a road crossing here. So, any tension in your torso, in your back, down through your abdomen, and down into your hips, And your glutes, how are those feeling? Your upper legs, your quads, and your hamstrings. Any tightness you notice, or soreness. Down to your knees. Your lower legs, your calves, and your shins, if you have any shin splints or tight calves. And your ankles. Anything you feel there? My right ankle feels a little tender today, but not too bad. Down into your feet, all the way up to your toes. How do your toes feel? And so just get the whole picture of how is your body feeling today. Okay. Now, try to do one of the harder sections for me. And this whole thing is honestly a challenge. Usually run on my own, minus Tina on the Together Run. So, talking for a while, for someone who tends to be on the introverted side, will be an interesting experiment. But one of the hard questions Tina always asks that I know I've brought up before in the Superstars group that is a struggle for me sometimes, is answering truthfully and honestly the question, how are you today? How are you feeling mentally? If you had to tell me how are you feeling, what would you say? Maybe what's weighing on your mind? What do you feel good about? If you feel great, how would you answer? Most of us, usually when we get that question, are, I feel fine, or good, or not much. But if you dug deep, I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer that question. And stop my watch because I forgot. So we'll be a few minutes off. Now, if I had to answer that question, I'm going to have to think about it. I guess lately, maybe the answer is a little tired, maybe a little stressed. I've had some issues getting enough sleep. Pardon, I'm just doing some work here on the side of the trail. Okay, we're away from the trucks there. So, saying I'm not getting enough sleep. We're kind of having some battles with my 3-year-old daughter and getting to bed and staying in bed and waking me up in the middle of the night. So that, unfortunately, ends up with me having some insomnia because she cries out and I get a shot of adrenaline to wake me up, and I struggle sometimes getting back to sleep. Hi, how you doing? So that has been a challenge. And then just stress of holidays and trying to clean and organize our house. We have kind of some bad habits around not keeping the most organized house. And it's a constant battle for me and my wife trying to keep everything together and clean and organized, and sometimes that creates tension between the two of us, which is no fun for anybody. So, what things are weighing on your mind? Or, if you're feeling positive, what are some positive things? Because I'm not completely down, Just saw a bunch of family over the last weekend, and it was good to see them and talk. As maybe the pandemic is not quite as bad as some other parts of the year have been. So, got to see some friends and family. And usually, that's not something I've had a lot of opportunity to do between work and the pandemic. So, that's something that's been happy and good going on. So think about what's on your mind. I'm going up a little hill, so I'll give you some time while my breath is a little short to think to yourself. All right. So, in a break from just running through all of the usual things that we do in the Together Run, I will answer some questions I put out to our Superstars group. What would they want to know about? Or what questions would they ask somebody on a Together Run as part of our miles and minutes, which we do every day? And if you're not a superstar, I highly recommend it. It's a great group. Lots of great people in it, other runners of all abilities. and is very supportive, and it's often been kind of my accountability buddy that we have. Pardon my spit. Some the miles and minutes post where, whether people really care or not, I feel like there's there's some people here that want to hear what I've been doing. And so maybe if I'm not feeling great, but I know I'm supposed to get out there and get after it, I will do something working off of whatever my effort level is at that day, so I can post and interact. And so as someone that doesn't have a regular running group or a coach or anything like that right now in my life, that's something that helps with keeping me accountable to myself and what my goals are and what I want out of running. So highly recommend joining. So on the questions front, one of the questions I got from the group was, what's a little something that maybe you take for granted on your runs that if you didn't have, you'd miss? So usually when Tina asks these types of questions, I'm always thinking, so I recommend the same for you guys, that you think about the question yourself and you can tell me the answer in your mind or post it whenever this gets released and let me know. I had a hard time coming up with this, whether there's a piece of gear that I take for granted or something that I do during every run. I guess the biggest thing for me these days would be my phone. It's a couple of things about it. First is Strava, tracking my runs and what I'm doing, but also having that easy access to a camera. I take a lot of pictures these days while I run. It's one of the things that keeps me engaged. I like to explore new places, or I'm often running when the sun is rising, so I get to take some really beautiful pictures. And it's something that these days means a lot to me when I don't necessarily have huge current goals for running. The getting out the door and exploring aspect of things is why I do it. Or one of the reasons anyway. And as I run by people talking to myself, I understand how Tina feels. It's kind of a strange concept. Usually I try to glide by pretty quietly. So, very different. So let's go on to our senses check-in. And we'll start with, what do you smell? So take a deep breath in through your nose, and let's see what we can smell. And unfortunately, as usually for me, I don't smell all that much, unless it's very strong. Kind of getting the fall air, but I have a kind of perpetually runny nose when I run, so usually I don't get too much smell. Unless it's on the stronger side. So that's usually my answer for that. But what are you picking up? What do you smell out on your run? It's late in the fall. It's probably not as plentiful as some other times of year as far as smells. But it can be interesting nonetheless. And moving along. What do you taste? Is there any leftover taste from maybe you had breakfast or gel? Tina often has toothpaste, has one of hers. Right now mine's kind of the brisk taste of cold air. Where it's almost not even a taste, but your tongue is chilled, almost like you're having something like peppermint, but it's just the cold. So, what are you tasting? And then go into what do you hear. So if you have headphones on, turn them off or take them out and tell me what you hear around you while we go. And I'll give you a minute or so to work on that, although as I often find, I leave them off longer and then come back and it's still quiet, so it might be a few minutes of just listening to your surroundings and finding what you can. Okay, so what did you hear? I heard some cars right at the beginning as I was winding my way up a little driveway back onto the rail trail. And I just heard a stream crossing. And I went over little bridge. And my footsteps on the cinder path I'm on right now. Kind of crunching. And my breathing as I try to bring it back down from being on the heavy side from going up a hill and talking. So it's hard to maintain uninterrupted talking throughout these. So I have a lot of respect for Tina while she does it, because answering her back in my head is much easier than talking out loud. Okay, so back to what do you feel? And this is not the same as the body check-in we did earlier. And you might feel some things with your body as far as tightness, but this is, what do you feel? Well, like, I feel my hat on my head with my earmuff kind of squeezing it tight. I feel my upper lip kind of cold where my mustache is catching some sweat in the cool. Because even though it's cold, I'm dressed warmly enough to sweat. And it's probably also catching, as gross as it is, but it's running for real. It's not running out of my nose, which is typical, especially in the winter for me. It's thankfully today not cold enough to freeze my beard with the sweat and other liquid. So that's a happy day. Feel some sweat running down my cheeks, my gloves, kind of hugging my hands between my fingers. Some cold breeze as my shirt has come untucked a little bit. My hydration vest bouncing on my shoulders. Which I guess that's something else that is a little thing I take for granted with running. To go back to my earlier question, is my vest. I wear it even when I don't have water in it, because it makes it easy to carry things like my keys and my phone. So what are you feeling? And for the 30-minute folks, my watch right now is reading about 21 minutes. If you stopped this play along while you were doing your listening, it's probably a little bit more than that. And I started a few minutes late, so we're probably in the last 5 or 6 minutes of the 30-minute run. So, moving on from touch, go to our last sense, the one we're always using, your sense of sight. What do you see? Try to look off to the left as long as it's safe to do so. Always make sure that you're paying attention to your surroundings. If there are cars or anything, don't ignore them. What do you see off to the left? For me, it's just woods right now with fallen leaves and empty trees. Look up and down. Try to notice something maybe you haven't noticed before. If you're doing a route that you usually do. And then look up and down, kind of left to the front, not full left. And then try looking to the right, see what you can see. It's kind of a marshier side of the forest for me. A lot of moss growing on the roots of the trees. And then right to the front. See if you notice anything. And right up in front of you. I'm also passing a bench that's on the side of the trail. There's a tree house off to one of the sides that someone built for their kids in their yard. And a mile marker post that come up every so often along these trails. So what are you seeing? And as we're coming to the end of 30 minutes here, one of the other questions that was asked a lot is people wanting to know about where I was running and why I chose the route that I'm running and what's it look like. I've already given you some ideas. It's a pretty flat, which is one of the reasons I chose it, because I knew I'd have to talk, and super hilly would make that more difficult. But there are a few rolling hills. It's mostly a cinder path with some paved sections and some road crossings. It's a nice little loop that goes out around the lake. That's pretty scenic. It's quiet. There aren't too many cars near it. So I picked it in part for that reason, because I knew I didn't want lots of noise. I live around some highways and train crossings and things like that at my house, so it can be a little bit hard to hear podcasts at times, so I imagine that would get picked up pretty loudly. So, and it's a nice run. I haven't gotten out to do it in a while. Kind of fell into the habit during the pandemic of trying to be home with my kids when they're getting up. So it's just easier to run from home a lot of the time. And especially as I've been rebounding from an extended off period, I wasn't really pushing it. So most of my runs were on the shorter end. And so with family being kind of a number one priority and helping my girls get ready to go to school or get up in the morning or just not throwing off their routine, I figured, why not use a day that I took some time off from work, as I have a bunch of time to burn towards the end of the year here before the new year morning, and visit a nice trail to do this together on. And it might be somewhere that if someone were visiting me, we were going to go on a run, somebody that is a friend of mine that runs, I might choose to take them, because it's an easy place to run and to talk and not have to worry about your footing on a technical trail or cars or anything like that. All right. So I think we've hit 30 minutes here. So we're going to do like we usually do, 2 strides. And as Tina always mentions, this is about turnover, not lengthening your stride. So you just want to pick it up and get your legs moving a little faster. I usually try to focus on form, trying to pull my legs through quickly so as not to overstride. Maybe keep my hips tall so I'm not sitting down into the run. So I'm going to start one of those, and it'll go 10 to 15 seconds of a little bit faster running. And then for those of us doing more, 45 minutes or an hour, you can go with a jog or a slow jog. And then if you're in the 30-minute group, you can stop and walk. If you're back at your house or wherever you started, you can turn around. So I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, come to a jog or a walk. And this is a good time, maybe we'll stop and take our picture. You guys can take your picture. I can't take mine until the end. I'll take a picture of myself that I'll share whenever this is released. And just let me see what you're seeing, or if you want to take a picture of yourself, a selfie, giving me a thumbs up or a high five, or just however you look while you're running, go ahead. I've come to the end of this section of the trail, so I'm turning around. And then once you're done with your picture, we'll do our second stride. And then we'll bid farewell to our 30-minute folks. It's been a pleasure running with you. So, okay. You finished taking your picture. I'll do our next stride in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Slow to a walk or to a jog. Thank you, 30-minute group. It's been a pleasure getting to run with you and for you to let me do this together run with you. So far, it's been a fun and interesting experience. If you want to hang out and listen to the rest while you cool down or stretch, that'd be cool. If you don't, hope you have a wonderful day and things go well for you in your day. All right. So, moving along. The next kind of most frequent question that popped up on the Superstars group for me was people just kind of asking me to tell my running story, how I got into running, why I run. So this will take up probably the rest of the time, or a decent chunk of it, because it's a pretty long story. It's over, not as long as some, I'm sure, but we're at over 25 years at this point, where I've had running in my life for part to most of it, though there are some kind of like a lot of relationships, highs and lows. So, how did I get started running? Kind of the question of that, and I'll answer both, is which time? As I wait for a car here at this crossing. And kind of starting with the first time was back in middle school. I don't think we had a track team or a cross-country team. It was just PE class, running the mile, and in my middle school we had like a 1.25 mile cross-country course that we would run, and I was always one of the better kids at it. I would usually be the first one done, or maybe second. Sometimes people that were playing soccer and doing sports would beat me. I didn't really do too many sports. I took Taekwondo. And at that point was right around a black belt level. Haven't done that since then, really, but that's kind of the only sport I was doing. But I lived kind of in a place of natural advantage, not like altitude, just I lived on Connecticut here in the Housatonic River Valley, down on the river itself at the bottom of a giant hill, and we'd spend, all year going up and down our hill, down to the river, the lake that was dammed off by the river, to swim and go boating. And anytime you needed to get anything from the house, you'd be going up the hill. And I was usually running because it's just what I did. And in the winter, we'd be sledding down the hill and bailing out before we hit the frozen water, and then walking back up the hill. So a lot of just kind of natural exercise, which is something I miss as an adult, that I'm not out all the time. I mean, even if you look at a kid, doing monkey bars on a playground, if you look at obstacle course races, that's basically a playground. So kids are doing that stuff every day for fun. And I know if I try to do monkey bars these days, being quite a bit heavier than I was kind of in my prime, it's killer. So as a kid, I was just building up all this natural endurance and strength just playing. And so I took that in middle school, and my father had done track and field in high school and basketball, and he was mostly a middle distance guy. He would run like the 800 meters, and he played some soccer and did some cross country. But in my younger childhood with his job, he didn't really run, at least not that I was aware of. But then around my middle school days, he started doing 5Ks and 10Ks again. And so in 7th grade, when I was, I guess, 13 at the time, going on 14, I decided I'd run a 5K with him. I was, a good runner in school. Why not? And I did a little bit of training, but nothing serious. And on Father's Day, with my dad, I ran my first 5K. And it was awful. I was used to running, a mile and a half. Had no idea how to pace myself. Went out like I was running that mile and a half. Had about 6-minute pace in the, must have been 90 plus degree Fahrenheit. So probably 33 or so centigrade. I'm not sure if that's as hot as I think it should be, but I think so. It's close enough. And it was humid, as it is here in the Northeast. And I died. I got about a mile in, got a side stitch, stopped and walked for quite a while. My father caught up and passed me and beat me by 2 minutes. I ran 26 minutes and 40-something seconds, I think. It was, that's not a bad time, but it was a bad race. And I remember sprinting to the finish and then keeling over and throwing up in the chute. I believe I missed the guy in front of me, so that's a good thing. And so that was the story of kind of where I got started with running for the first time. It was an awful 5K where I went out too hard, died, and then sprinted the finish. And just an interesting anecdote about that race is the overall male winner in that race was Bill Rogers. Now, I didn't get to meet or talk to him, but still kind of a cool thing for, a fairly local 5K here in New England. So that's my first foray into running. And we're coming up now probably at 45 minutes. So in a couple minutes we'll do another strider. In 8th grade I ran 2 5Ks on the roads. One around Halloween, which I did really well. I want to say second in my age group, ran in the 22-minute range, and then I did a Father's Day race again, and was around 24 minutes on a hot day. But still, I wasn't really training until I got to be a freshman in high school. And that's where things really started to take off into we'll call it the competitive phase of my running. kind of borderline local elite, I guess. As a freshman, I kind of started off. I had never broken 6 minutes in the mile at that point yet, because I hadn't really worked for it. And our cross-country team, which was, we were decent. We weren't amazing. A very laid-back coach who was one of the math teachers at the school. His name was Mr. Sauer. And, he knew what he was doing. He gave us good workouts. But a lot of the stuff I remember is we did everything running for time. On trails or sometimes roads. It was always go out and run 30 minutes. Go out and run 45 minutes. Go out and run an hour. And I still do that to this day. Time instead of distance. Because distance, I've always found, makes me want to finish faster. Because I can. On time, you're running as long as you're running, no matter how fast you run. You can't race through a workout. And so I came in as a freshman, and we did our first, mile time trial on the cross-country course, and I ran maybe 6:05, and was going into our first race off of that, ranked like the 12th best person on our team of maybe 20 guys. And in the first race, I miraculously was able to pace myself pretty well in a 3-mile race and ran back to back to back at like 6:30s and finished as our 5th runner. And that's kind of where I would be all year long. And end the year dipping under 19 for 5K with a hip flexor injury. That would keep me out of like the postseason, the state meet, those types of things. And then I got a growth spurt and grew about 5 inches. So as a sophomore, I went from our 5th best guy to our best guy. And passing up another runner who I still am at least social media friends with these days, who started off as our best guy and then ran into some trouble medically, and I ended up as our number 1 guy and ended the season around 17:15 for 5K. So it was just a giant jump, and mostly I'm talking cross country because I ran track and I swam for our swim team in the winter because we didn't have an indoor track team when I started high school, and I hated track and field. Hated it. The races were all too short for me. I've never been quote unquote fast. And what I mean that is compared to people of comparable ability to myself at the time. I had no kick. And it's probably in part because I didn't strength train. I just ran. But I would run dead even pace. It's what I did. And the more hills, the better for me. And so, before we continue on, we're at the 45-minute end here, a little past. So let's do our next 2 strides. And then we'll get back to our topic here. So 3, 2, 1. Alright. So do a jog if you're in the hour. Walk or jog if you're in the 45 minute. And so I ended up being the number one guy at my high school and the second best guy in my 4 years. My freshman year, we had a guy who was third New England behind two other really excellent runners, one of which I think went on to Foot Locker Nationals and went professional running. And he was crazy fast for me. But, okay. Second strider in 3, 2, 1. All right. So if you're in the 45-minute group, you're done. Thank you for running with us and letting me talk your ear off, I guess. Yes, we can do a second body check for a minute, see if there's anything, if you think, work your way from the top down, see if anything feels different than when you started. Anything new, tweaked, or sore, or tight that maybe you need to roll out with a foam roller, or stretch, or get a massage, if you're lucky enough. All right. So saying I was our top runner in cross country and also in track for and a sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school, culminating in winning the state title for cross country for schools that were in the same size category as mine. Just how Connecticut breaks it up. It's done on size. We were a medium-sized school, and so I was able to really nail that race, and that was probably one of my best running moments to date, because it was just about a perfect race, which culminated with my father scaring the bejesus out of me as we were coming into kind of the final stretch. I had opened up what I thought was a sizable lead, going down a big hill after we crested a big uphill. I had taken off and put in my move. I'm coming out of the woods, and my father yells to me, 5 yards, Brandon. I was like, 5 yards? Oh, God. These other guys are much better kickers than I am. I'm dead in the water. I don't have anything left. I gotta maintain. Pick it up a little bit. And about I don't know, 30 seconds later, a coach who was a friend of mine who I had known, who coached one of our other local schools, Marty Ogden from Danbury High School, who's a top program here in the state, and has been a top program even in the country in a number of years, yelled at me, "You got 50 yards. And I was like, oh, thank God. And powered my way through the finish line and celebrated. And it was a great moment, but met with some heightened fear and adrenaline along the way. So from there I went off to college, and I wasn't heavily recruited because my track and field times were never comparable to my cross-country results. I got some letters from various schools, but I also had minimal self-confidence on how fast I could run. I would look at guys running 27 minutes for 8K in college and be like, I'm never going to be able to do that. I can't run that fast. I think my senior year in a 5-mile road race, I had run 29 minutes and something, and I just didn't see myself improving that much. I couldn't fathom it in my mind. And I also knew I wanted to go to a smaller school, so I ended up visiting, and then due to my visit kind of being recruited by a few Division III schools, which, if you're not familiar with the NCAA, Division III is pretty much the low level where you don't get scholarships, and I always viewed it kind of as like the caliber was the caliber of your state meet in high school as far as depth, but you didn't have that top tier guys that were just blowing people out of the water who went Division I. So I ended up going to Muhlenberg College, which is a small school in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and running there. And I had looked at their times, and their guys were running like 28 minutes for 8K, and I was like, oh, that's good. You know, I looked at the school records on the track, and they were, 15:50 for 5K and 33 minutes for 10K. And I was like, oh, those are really good times, So this must be, a decent program. I didn't know anything. This was, before the huge advent of the internet where information was wildly and readily available to people. I had no idea about anything. Other than what guys in Foot Locker ran from looking at a magazine or catching it on ESPN when they used to roll it on ESPN 2, I think. And I'd get together with some buddies and watch it and be like, holy God, these guys are amazing. So I went into college, and I started off as the second best runner on our cross-country team, with one guy ahead of me who midway through my freshman year quit for a time, and so much like in high school, I got thrust into the top runner position. So it seemed to me, whether I was ready or not, I was going to be a top guy. And by the end of freshman year, I had been the fastest freshman the school had ever had in cross country. I had broken the school record for the distance medley relay with our team, and the 5K and the 10K. And I maintained being one of our top runners, but we got a new track coach, and he did a better job recruiting. And I maintained being number 1 or number 2 or number 3 guy in most events, and still holding a bunch of school records throughout. And I made it to the Division III National Championships as an individual my junior year in cross country by placing high enough at my regional meet. And that was another kind of highlight experience where I was one of my proudest accomplishments as a runner. So then, after college, I went on to coach. Went to college for teaching mathematics, became a teacher and a coach, and went on to coach cross country and track for a few years. That kept me in touch with running and intact with working out and doing pretty well. But I didn't really have any goals as an individual. I wasn't like, I'll run the marathon or the half marathon. And those things didn't seem as prevalent quite as they are today. They were still up there, but this was the early 2000s. And so I coached and got some guys that became really excellent high school runners, and that was amazing. Coached at New Milford High School in Connecticut, and we had a really excellent team with a lot of tradition, and it's also one of my favorite running memories, was coaching and cheering for guys that I'd worked with. And I've always been kind of that cheerleader type guy who, if I'm at a race, will cheer on other competitors and encourage people, because it's fun, and I always like the team aspects of things. And then I unfortunately lost my teaching job. I was never the best at kind of being forceful with discipline, and was too young. I was 25. I probably looked like I was 18. I got mistaken for a student, and just was something that wasn't the right fit for me. And so, since most other jobs don't fit with coaching, I kind of ended up not coaching much anymore, and kind of transitioned to the next phase of my life. And I think all of those things compiling, along with moving several times, I just fell out of running for probably about 10 years. I would come back off and on, but never really get anything consistent going. And it just didn't work out. And then in 2015, my mother, who had always been my biggest supporter, passed away of early onset dementia. And she had been a giant supporter of mine with running, and she had started a race to raise money for our local track team that was still going on in my hometown. on Mother's Day. So I got together with my uncle and my cousins and my aunt and ran that race in her honor. And my cousin, who had started doing cross country and track, kicked my butt, and he's gone on to run Division III in college, and I'm super proud that he kind of followed in my footsteps 18 years after me. And he just got super into running and social media. I'd see people that I went to college with or went to high school with that were, not even runners. There's like the hurdler from my college cross-country team or college track team, or a girl that I had classes with in high school who was not an athlete at all, or a pole vaulter from high school, and they were doing crazy things, running Ironman triathlons and half Ironmans. And there's a girl who even quit my college cross-country team, was doing Ironman triathlons, or they were doing marathons. Two friends from my high school team, one of them a couple years older than me, and one of them that I graduated with that I'm still friends with to this day, and since the pandemic I've actually talked to a number of times, started doing ultra marathons. And like the toughest mudder and things like that, and doing really rather well. And I was just super impressed by all these people, and I got to thinking, if them, why not me? I was, as or more talented. I didn't have to put in half the effort these people are putting into to get twice the result. Why am I sitting on my butt? Why don't I get out the door and get back in shape? And so I did. I got back out. First in 2016, around the time I was starting to get in shape, and then we had my first daughter, who's now 5, and that interrupted any plans I had. But then, again in 2018, when I first found running for real, my youngest daughter, who's just turned 3, so they're the same age as Tina with the Bailey, so I was able to really connect with Tina around having a young daughter. And I preceded her with the same breakdown of 2 small daughters, same distance apart, just hers are younger than mine, but I'm older than her, so it works out. I would do stroller runs with my older daughter when my wife had the younger one after she was born. And I just wasn't willing to let it go. I wanted to be in shape to show my girls that being outside is great and being in shape is great, and that I wasn't going to be someone who just sat around all the time. And so I got in shape, and I've now done 2 ultra marathons. I've never run an actual marathon because I don't want to think about time. Somebody asked me to transition to trails. Well, I always loved cross country, and I knew getting back in I was struggling with, I'm never going to set a PR. I'm just not. I ran 32 minutes for 10K and 15:20 for 5K, and I'm not going to do that these days. I'm 38, 39, 40 years old with a 10-year gap in any kind of serious training. It's not realistic. But I can go out and set a PR for how far I've run or how long I can run for. I can explore new places and do new things. And that's where I am today, and sharing my love of exploration and hiking with my daughters. And my oldest has started to pick up on running a little bit. Nothing serious, but she likes to run around. And took her for a quote-unquote run around the neighborhood where she walked and ran because she wanted to. And if she does, that's great. If she doesn't, also great. She also big into singing and dancing around our house. So whichever way she goes is great. So we're beyond 60 minutes now. I apologize to all of you. So we'll do our 2 striders, and we'll wrap it up. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, second strider. After a short jog here. In 3, 2, 1. All right. So we've reached the end here. Probably closer to 70 minutes. So if you ducked out early on me, I don't blame you. Got carried away talking. Told you it was a long story. And I appreciate you for listening to it. I have really enjoyed talking to myself for an hour, so maybe I'll just have to do it more often. And I hope you all have a great day, and I'm looking forward to everyone else who does these together runs and see what they come up with. So, goodbye, and talk to you later.
Hi friends, just a quick message to say a big thank you to the Running for Real team. While I may be the face of Running for Real and the voice behind the podcast, there are a group of people who are working tirelessly to provide everything that runners could need within our community, to make our community stronger, better, and evolve and grow and learn from one another. We are working really hard to make Running for Real the place we believe it can be within our community. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone on our team. That is Victoria, Stacy, Sandy, Sally, Maria, Kelsey, Kat, Jeremy, and Erica. I appreciate each and every one of you and the hard work that you put in. Now let's get back to the show.